Sean Payton, head coach of the New Orleans Saints. What's with this Saints Happy podcast? This has to be the worst Saints podcast in the world. Ralph can't say anyone's name right. Andrew doesn't know football. Everyone has a hard time listening to Dave. And is Kevin even there tonight? The audio with this podcast, my God, the audio, it's painful.
All right, everybody, welcome to a very special edition of the Saints Happy Hour podcast. Andrew continues his quest to outguest me. I got one good guest, Randy Mueller, and now Andrew's just putting me in the dirt. He's just booking great guests after great guests. We got the play-by-play voice of the Saints, Mike Haas. Mike, thanks for joining us today.
Love it. I got to admit, that Sean Payton stuff. What was that? I have not heard that intro.
That was, he did Cameo, Mike. And Andrew was like, we got to get in on Cameo before he raises the price. So we were like the first person to book his Cameo. And we were like, insult us, Sean, read this. And he did it. And we use it as our open.
Classic. Well, anyway, yeah, that was good stuff.
So Ralph's
idea.
Ralph's idea was that we would have him do it. And he was like, "Oh yeah, we should have him say all these great things about the podcast." And I said, "No. Have him insult us."
Yeah.
It feels more normal then. It feels like, hey, he actually heard.
Well, Connor does. His son is a patron, so that's nice. So we do have famous people. So Mike, the voice of the Saints, I read your interview with John DeShazer, and you made a really interesting point about it that I don't think a lot of people think about it. You're like, there's only 32 of these jobs, like TV, they have a bunch, but people cover the NFL, but there's only 32 voices of the NFL. What was it like for you to get that call? Because I know you were one of the finalists when they picked Zach Strief, but what's it like to get the call that Mike, you're going to be the voice of the Saints?
It's a little numbing, and there's a lot of preparation and stuff that goes into that point. And so I was talking to Diane Newman yesterday, and when we were discussing the job, it was always the play-by-play announcer, play-by-play for the Saints. It was never voice of the Saints. Never. We never used that term, never heard it until that night, Wednesday, when I was introduced as the play-by-play. And then from that point on, Christian, everybody, it was, hey, it's the new voice. And then it was like, that was really, wasn't the phone call that I had gotten the job. It was that moment when my new moniker was voice of the Saints as opposed to anything else. And it when I say hit home like a ton of bricks, it did. So it's the culmination of an enormously long journey from college communications to sports casting and wanting to make this jump, and certainly getting to New Orleans and knowing that the person that you're working with is also the voice of the Saints and would be the voice of the Saints for 30 years. So you pretty much knew any play-by-play route I was going to have was going to be in another market, and I didn't want to ever leave New Orleans. So did I ever think I would get this opportunity? Probably not. Certainly didn't think I'd ever get it twice. You might get one shot. Two, rare, very rare.
Yeah, it's interesting. We had Zach Strief on the show. He's a good friend of the show, and he's been on several times. And I remember when he first got this job, he came on and he told us he had done a bunch of prep work to kind of get the job, and he was turning in calls from old games, kind of reviewing them and just kind of learning the chops that way on the fly. I guess for you, though, you've been a media guy, you've been in New Orleans for a long time. The learning curve won't be as steep, I'm guessing. How do you kind of prep for this as you get started?
Well, I tell you, I think if you look at Zach and I's situation, they are just so diametrically 180, in that Zach was all about learning the broadcast and commercials and how much to talk, when to get deuce, and he's the play-by-play, but yet he played the game. And so much to him was foreign, but he did an enormous job. And you don't even know, half of what Zach was doing was digital, Facebook, social media, cameras in the booth. All that stuff is all Zach. So he's already in 3 years taking this broadcast to a completely new level. So for Zach, it was about that, the broadcast aspect that was new to him. And for me, it's the stuff that came so easy for Zach is what I'm working on. It's like just looking at a formation and, determining how much time I have to say 2 wide receivers left, two right. Zach was 2 by 2, 2 by 3. His football terminology, he didn't have to think about it. He knew the play, for gosh sake. He could probably look at the alignment and go, all right, it's going to be a run right. And I'm determining the exact opposite. I'm looking at the defense and who's the running back and is the quarterback under center, all that stuff. So I'm trying to do that in my head, whereas the broadcast, that stuff is kind of, I have done that. So it's the football stuff. So conversely, we're both had different challenges going in, but I will say, since he's a friend of your show, he's been unbelievable. He was unbelievable in 2018, but since, he went back to coaching, we've talked. He's been in the office here in the Superdome about what works, what doesn't work, about taking the broadcast to the next level. I mean, he's been amazing. Just a great guy and class. And man, he's just been so helpful, and I'm just so appreciative of his work, and certainly of what Jim's in New York right now. So I've talked to him, and certainly I'll reach out to him when he gets back from New York. But again, he and Zach could not be farther apart in how they approach calling a game. Jim is old school, red and green and blue markers, in the smallest print you could ever see on a big board. I would watch him do it, and I would go, "What in the world is that?"
You go in the lobby of the old Channel 4 building and
that's right.
Have his flip card and he would sit and call plays and flip it over and flip it back, and it would just be like him late at night at like 9:00 in the lobby of WWL building.
And remember, and Jim just couldn't go, "Oh, let's see, Marquez Callaway. How did he do in 2019?" There's no Google. There's no didn't have any of that stuff. The Saints would have a release that would come out on Wednesday. The NFL maybe Tuesday. So all of that was on a fact sheet that you would get from the NFL, and then he would talk to always, constantly coaches and the opposing. But I mean, just think of that job in the 80s, not being able to Google anything. I mean, it was a different era. Zach's all technology. Zach's iPads and, his car, he is all technology. And so, very, very different, yet very, very good.
The voice of the Saints, Mike, is the tone of it. As fans, we don't want impartial, right? You're the voice of the Saints, but at the same time, you have to tell it like it is and that sort of thing. How do you envision your sort of tone of the broadcast? Whereas how much fan do you put into it? How much impartiality? What sort of I don't know the right word, but sort of the impression, the voice you want to have for yourself calling games?
I don't know. because I really don't know. I covered this team as a reporter for so long. So you have a certain mindset, right? I mean, you're just totally objective, totally. And then I became a season ticket holder, and I was a fan for the first time in 20 plus years. I was a fan, and I was a fanatic. I was a nightmare. I was a lunatic. So, and then I worked with the team on the sidelines for the last 3 years. So then I'm an employee. So that's a whole nother level. So I think goal. So that's when I say, I don't know. But I think the goal would be to be not impartial. I'm going to be partial, but I'm not going to be a homer. I don't want it to be so obtrusive to the average fan out there. They're going to know that guy's the voice of the Saints. But I think there's a pretty fine line between being impartial and being partial to your team and being a homer. And I think that is somewhere of the difference. I'm fine listening, and this is my personal opinion, mine only. I'm fine listening to the home team's broadcast of anything, but if you become such a homer, it's kind of a turnoff for me. Mm-hmm. I want to know that you're the guy. I get it. I can tell that, but it's just a fine line.
Mm-hmm.
It's so funny to hear you say that because I'm just thinking of like Joel Myers, on the Pelicans, and he's kind of got like that disappointed dad tonality in his. But Jim Henderson had that too, and Zach maybe has a little bit more of like a, "Come on, brother, how could you do this?" He has like that kind of. So it'll be just interesting to see your random angles and your voice tonality and how that evolves with time.
No, that's right. I think you said the right word. It's going to be an evolution. Certainly getting to know Deuce and that dance. And I have the luxury that Jim and others didn't have. And I've got NFL Game Pass. I can listen to every Zach and Deuce game. And I have, I've listened to them all the time on the radio, just looking for cadence, looking for, not trying to be Zach, because like I say, I could never be Zach. He looks at a play and can do anything. I'm just looking for the people, and I could never be Jim. He uses words I've never even heard of. So I just think it's going to be an evolution. And I hope that you get a sense of the emotion of the building, right? Mm-hmm. You're not there, or you are there, you're listening, but you get a feel of the emotion. You get a feel of, hey, it's 3rd and 8 on the 10. This is big, and you get a sense of both Deuce and my love for this team, love for this city, and love for the game, and that all comes out. You leave, win or lose, you get that.
Yeah, well, when I was a kid, Mike, when we would come out of church at 12:30, me and my dad had a running game, and it was, can we tell if the Saints are winning or losing as soon as Jim Henderson gets back from break before he tells the score? And I believe I could almost guess if the Saints are winning and losing just by the tone of his voice. Like it was just this, he would say like 3 words and you'd be like, uh-oh, the Saints are getting their head kicked in again, So I'm interested too about you mentioned that you're starting to look at games and that sort of thing. Are you practicing? Are you doing only good Saints games? Are you doing bad ones? Are you mixing it up when you watch the Game Pass?
I think you're just kind of doing, first off, on the Jim thing, when you were young, they were always losing. So the chances are when you flipped on the radio, they were losing, right? So I became a season ticket holder in 2006. They do nothing but win. So, you can't go back too far. I think a lot of it is you're just looking at it, I'm watching basketball. I'm watching golf. I'm watching anything now, and I look at it differently. And so I'm just kind of thinking about doing this play in my head. And so if you practice too much on Game Pass of the 2017 game, you start, things get in your head, players get in your head. And so I just think it's more about saying, forget the names of the people, right? Because that's going to change, but just what you'd say on the play. What is the quarterback? Because again, it's radio. We're describing, you have a lot of people who are at the game, so they're listening and watching. They don't need, but you have a lot of people who are at home, TV turned down, radio up. But really, you're painting the picture for the people who are listening to it on the radio. That's your job. And so my practice right now, besides the mountain of research of the players and the backups, again, Baltimore, it's going to be 180 players in a new stadium for me and my first broadcast, and everybody listening whom I've known since the age of 2. And, that will be the hardest game of the 20 plus playoffs that we have. That will be the most difficult.
Right. You forget the preseason rosters are 90, and you've got random guys that may not even be on the team the next week playing half a quarter.
Yeah. And probably, I don't know how they'll attack 3 games, but the starters aren't going to play very much. You're going to have the 3rd string fullback from Baltimore. And I'm going to go, all right, Deuce, 3rd string fullback for Baltimore. I mean, right. It's a lot of people. At least I haven't even checked the roster. It used to be 90. I'm pretty sure they'll have at least that. But that game will be one of the most difficult, if not the most difficult game, just because of so many challenges. First game, that many people, to do stadium. But so that's what I'm doing. So it's really the research. But you can, the games you can practice, but really, if you don't know the people and some Phil and that aspect, is what I'm really working on right now. And then once I get to training camp, then it's about kind of implementing, the players and the stats so that it's not all having to look down and try to find it, because that's what what I learned from talking to Zach. I mean, you're getting, I'm used to it. I'm sure that was probably not difficult, but challenging for him initially, is that I'm used to having people talk in my ear and talk while people are talking in my ear. So I've always had that in television. So you've got a spotter that's telling you blank or showing you, and a statistician that's telling you blank or showing you. You got a lot, and it's your head's on a swivel, and so man, and it's all in a finite amount of 9 seconds, because then it's Deuce. That's what people want to hear. We saw the play. Shut up. Let me hear what Deuce has to say. And so that's the trick. That's the part is to find that right balance of information and knowledge, get out of the way, and let Deuce do his thing.
Well, Mike, just a little piece of advice. If you're worried about pronouncing names correctly, don't listen to this podcast, because Ralph will absolutely ruin it for you. No, but
I'm brutal at that. I'm brutal at that. It frightens me so much. I could practice it 1,000 times, and then I'm like, oh gosh, so what everybody always did, we just say it fast. Say it fast. And people will go,
act like you mean it.
I think he said it right. Did he say it right? I don't know. I think he said it right.
The Andrew has me shook with names. Like they make fun of me so much, Mike. Even when I say it right, like I have no confidence. But
it's tough, man. You have to say it a lot. And it's way, there's more international, more Hawaiian, there's so many more, names that are hard, harder than ever. So yeah, that's part of it.
Well, Mike, I want to take a step back real quick. Your evolution is so fascinating to me, and just kind of walk through your career. I didn't know that. I actually live in Charlottesville, Virginia, and I've been here for 8. I'm a Saints season ticket holder, and I still fly back for games. But I live in Charlottesville, and I didn't realize that you were a Virginia guy, that you spent time in Manassas, and that you went to JMU. And so I kind of assume you were just a New Orleans guy your whole life. And the reason I felt that way is just I remember watching you at 4th Down on 4. I remember you being later just an anchor on the news. And so at a young age, when I was a kid, by the way, you haven't aged at all. I think you might be a Highlander or something. You look the exact same.
It's all these filters I got going on.
Yeah. No, I mean, so I've seen you, and then obviously more recently you're on the sideline with the Saints. And so at every step in your career, as a Saints fan, as a person that watches the New Orleans news, I feel like you've always been there. And now you've evolved to this, and so it's exciting, and it feels really comfortable, because it's like, oh yeah, Mike Haas has a job. I know him. I've known him forever. And I think most people in New Orleans feel that way. But I'm just curious if you can kind of talk a little bit about how you came to this point and kind of your evolution in your career.
To go from the television side, or to get to the play-by-play side?
To get
just all of it, yeah.
Yeah.
Wait, so you're sitting in Charlottesville, Virginia right now?
That's right.
Holy cow. That's one of my favorite cities. I worked when I left college, my first job ever out of college was a part-time job at the radio station WCHV AM, and no, that was the FM WCHV. It was sister station AM, and I did drive time news on Saturday and Sunday, like part-time. So I was sleeping on my buddy's floor who went to UVA, and then I came back. I went to Harrisonburg in television, and then came back, and I worked at WVIR for Channel 29 for a year and a half as a news reporter, and lived in Charlottesville. And I was in news because when you leave college and you want to get into sports and television, every small station has 2 sports guys. That's it, or sports people. And news will have 11 or 12. So it was very hard to break in. So I took a job in news and then moved over to sports. And so I would do sports at the AM radio station and WCHV, I think it's right, FM. And so, but they made me change my name. So I was Phil McConnell on radio, and Mike Hoss in news. Just, 84, 85. And so that was my first start in Charlottesville. I just love it. It's just a great town. So it was all about movement early. So I'm from the DC area. Manassas is like Laplace to New Orleans, 25 miles, it's a suburb. And so the goal was always get back to DC. That's, that was the goal. But I knew I needed to, go out and learn. So I worked in Charlottesville, Harrisonburg, Charlottesville again in television. And then I got a job as a sports anchor in Lawton, Oklahoma, where I spent a very long year. It's a good city. People are very nice, but it's a tough little city. And then I was a sports director for 2 years in Lubbock, Texas Tech. Lubbock is West Texas. You're not near anything.
That's right.
It's called the hub for a reason. There's nothing around it. But I was 24. I was young. Everybody there was young, and so I had a blast. I loved Lubbock, and so. But then I was like, I'd been a sports director. Now I need to really make a market jump. So I was lucky enough, and I was fortunate. Chris Myers was with Channel 4. It was Jim Anderson, Chris Myers, and Joe Amato. So when Chris left to go national, I filled Chris's spot. So really, it was his ambition, Chris Myers, and his ambition that was my opening to come to New Orleans. And I didn't even know. I had no idea there was an opening. Again, no internet. You used to get Broadcasting Magazine that would come out monthly or weekly, and in the back they'd have job openings where you'd have to mail. You have to look at an address, mail a tape. It was And so my weekend guy had put in for a job in New Orleans, and so his tape. That's how I found out there was even a job. And so it was luck. And literally, I got hired in January of 1989 and was here 30 days later. But again, this was going to be a 2-year stop. Man, it was just 2 years, get back to. So now, in 5 years since college, I've been at 5 stations, radio, TV, Lubbock, Lawton, Oklahoma. And so that's what you do. And got here, and Channel 4 was a beast in the day. We were owned by Loyola at that time. Everybody there was in their 30s. And established and good. And I was just young, 26-year-old. I didn't know anything. My first day on the job, they said, okay, we think Mike Archer is retiring or getting fired. We're going to go up. You're going to be live at the top of the show with a satellite truck. And I was like, what? Satellite truck? Like, what is that? I've never even seen one, more or less used one. That was my first day at work. Thankfully, Mike Archer didn't get fired because it would have been a much harder day. But he did have a press conference. So anyway, I became weekends, then fourth down on four year round. So I did weekends at Channel 4 in sports for 12 and a half, 13 years. Most people do weekends for 13 months. And they're like, I got to get off this weekends. It's killing me. I did it for 13 years. And then when I moved, I said, travel, sports was killing me. I said, I'm going to news just to, better my chances, of upward mobility. And they said, sure, we got a great job for you. How about the weekend news anchor? So I went from the sports anchor chair, and then the next week I was sitting one chair over in the news anchor chair, just like that. One weekend here, one weekend here. And so, but was very lucky. Did everything, ended up doing everything. Morning show, 6 o'clock show, 10 o'clock show for many years. News director a couple of times. I am what I am in this city thanks to WWL TV. And so I'm just lucky. And so the fact to get this, part of my journey now is so rare. It's what if you just said, can I do it? I did it in college and out of college. That's what you want. But man, again, it was a different time. There wasn't ESPN2. There wasn't barely ESPN. You didn't have the multitude of opportunities that you had now. You had national guys and you had the local radio team. That was it. And so there just wasn't, if you want to go down that road of play-by-play, you had to decide then that was the route you were going to take because there just weren't enough opportunities out there. So that is unbelievably a long answer to your question. That's
so you know, it's great.
But a few years in, I just realized this was it. You know, I didn't want to go back to DC. I loved it here. Met my wife here, had kids, built a house. Katrina, you know, everything in my birthday is August 29th, Katrina. So, wow. You know, everything just kind of, I was meant to be here, and I've always felt that way. And nowhere is the fan and the audience closer to their news, sports, radio talent than they are here, period. Nowhere. It doesn't happen in Cincinnati, in Orlando, in any other market. I don't care what they say. Oh yeah, we blah, 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 blah. The closeness and the relationships between the audience and the on-air talent is like none other here. I've never seen anything like it. It's just unique.
You know, and the point about the fans and people being so close to the media, it brings up a point. My brother is vice president of the tooling. He oversees their mailing and shipping. And he was telling me a story when they announced, I think it was only for a short time, that the Times-Picayune was like, we're not going to publish every day. He's like, my whole department is freaking out. Everyone in New Orleans, you get the Times-Picayune at work and you share it. You take the sports, I take this, and everybody reads it. And it's like I think at one point, New Orleans had like a 83% of the people read something in the Times-Picayune. So that your point about the media and the fans just being so close, that reminded me of that story with my brother. Like, they know you and they feel like you're part of, you're part of New Orleans, and you sort of transition, you're a guy from somewhere else, but you stay long enough and we're like, you're from New Orleans now. You're New Orleans through and through. My question to you before we get to something that I think people are going to really enjoy, being where you've come from, and you talked about, growing up in the 90s, doing your job and that sort of thing. Does the play-by-play, you think, for the Saints have even more of a special meaning? Because you're of an age, like, same with me, it's like, and Andrew, it's like, play-by-play, man, that was like, God, if you could get to the play-by-play announcer, that was like the mountaintop. Now you could be a star and you just start a YouTube channel and you can become famous, right? But for us, it's like there were tiers, and like play-by-play was at the tippy top of that.
Yeah, it's let's put it this way. It's the pinnacle. I mean, it's the pinnacle of my journey. And again, there's 32 of them. There's not, you know what I mean? Just like in television, really. When you come to a market like New Orleans, there's at the 4 stations, 3 people per station. There's 12 sports openings in you want to live in New Orleans, you got a 1 in 12 shot of landing a job here. That's just the way the industry is. And there's 32 play-by-play guys for NFL teams on radio. And that's the sacred cow. That's the voice of. It's one of the things that Jim talked about when he left WBL Radio for that brief time to go do national games. And he did a great job, but he was not part of the community. He would do his game, get on a plane, come back. He wasn't part of, he's not vested in the win or the loss or who played well. So there's a difference. So yeah, it is the pinnacle. These jobs are like judgeships.
I was going to say, it's like Supreme Court.
My dad's a judge, a retired judge. So I know I can say this. They're great jobs. People don't leave them. And you become a judge and you're like, yeah, I'm good. No, 85. Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. A few more years. They love it. And so these jobs, they don't come open very often. And so that is not lost on me. And, having to follow Jim and Zach, also not lost on me. So it's just, I think because of where I am in my career and my life and my age, I do. If I'd have gotten this at 28, no way would have appreciated it. No way. Anywhere close to where I am now, already having a connection with the fans as opposed to being a 28-year-old trying to make a connection with the fans. I just want to, quite frankly, the bar is up here somewhere. It's about meeting the expectations, because the expectations are pretty incredible.
All right. So before we talk about the 2021 Saints, Andrew has a bunch of questions about that. We need to go down memory lane because we did a Jim Mora bracket. Greatest Jim Mora rant, which, oh, by the way, find it if you haven't listened to it. It's amazing. Mike, he's so amazing at giving us content. He had 4 entries in this bracket that happened in the last 5 years. That's how amazing Jim Mora is, delivering just magical television moments.
Wait, we're not going back to when he was like in the bracket. The top 4 were in the last 5 years.
We had 4 entries in the bracket. We had 16 total entries. We had 4 in the bracket from the last 5 years that he did. It was he's amazing.
I've been at. I'm trying to think of the ones. I've been at almost all of them, but one that I can think of, and that was Diddley Poo and Sean. Other than that, I was standing right there. Ron Swoboda's, all of them. And it's sometimes they're directed at the media, and you're like, oh. And sometimes they're not. But either way, you never knew what was coming.
Well, this is it. I'm going to set the stage for this. This is 1991. It is a joint practice between the Saints and the Kansas City Chiefs. This would end up being the best Saints team in history up to that point. They would win a division title. Right. But Jim Mora was spitting nails after this practice and just going at the media, going at everybody. And a young Mike Haas in Ville Platte.
River Falls,
right? River Falls. A young Mike Haas is involved. And Andrew, I believe Mike Haas's question took this rant from Mount Rushmore to champion. And I want to play it, Mike, and then you can discuss it. You can tell us what was happening as this was going on.
Sure.
Oh, we got our ass kicked. We got our ass kicked. It was sickening. We have 18 plays on offense. First 18 plays, we turn the ball over, one for a touchdown. The other one's going to set up a touchdown. We can't, we got backs that can't hang on to the ball. They out-hit us. They out-toughed us. We stunk today. We're not even close between that football team and our football team. Not even close. Ridiculous. We run 2 screens. We don't block anybody. We get a back, gets his knee blown out on one of them. Can block anybody. We stunk.
He's just getting warmed up.
Jim injuries. I think
Dean told me he blew his knee out. You got to block people on a screen. Shit, he gets the ball out there, and 2 guys, big old animals, nail his ass. Shit, it's ridiculous. We run a screen before that, we get our ass nailed.
What about scales, coaches?
I don't know. Dean said he couldn't put any weight on his leg. That didn't sound too good to me. Shit, we're down. We're down in back. We're down in everything. We shit. We don't have enough people right now. It'll be hard to practice next week.
Here it comes.
Effectively.
Think it done for the year, you think?
I don't know. Dean told me it looked like he tore 2 knee ligaments. That doesn't sound very encouraging.
Do you take into account all the fact that Dave Bear?
I don't take into account shit. All I take into account is they kicked our ass today. That's what I take into account. Stowers. Well, let me just tell you something. He looked pretty good, right? They cut him before they came to camp. Kansas City Chiefs cut Stowers before they came to camp. Looked pretty good for us. Maybe that shows you the difference between our team and their team. I don't know.
When you go back to
what do you guys think about that? Pretty good indication, right? They won't even bring him to camp. Shit, he looks like our star of the day for the Saints.
Jim, will you change the focus of practice?
Depends if we got anybody that can practice. We can line up and do something.
Jim, was the effort there today? Did you?
It was all right. Buford Jordan goes in there and gets a little hit and knocks the ball out. Head gets in there, gets a little hit, ball goes out. Shit, I don't know if that's effort or not. It's horse shit ball carrying. I know that. Horse shit.
I mean, Mike.
Brutal.
It starts at a championship level and just goes up, 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 and finishes on a high note. Yeah. But your question to him, he just cut you off.
Right. I was just trying to, hey, do you take into account, these people aren't here. It's not apples to apples. I don't take into account. So with that, that was 2 minutes and 16 seconds. And believe me, I was there for every second of it. So I won't say it, but ASS, he says 5 times. The S word, 7. Horse S, twice. That's 12, 14. That's 14 curse words in 2 minutes and 16 seconds about a practice, And so this beat out Swoboda.
This week beat out Swoboda. I mean, Swoboda is involved in this bracket all over the place because I feel like Swoboda being an ex-Met and winning a World Series, like Swoboda would like buck up when Mora would scream at the media and maybe try to get y'all to back down. Swoboda would buck up, but we have we have a whole soundboard dedicated to Mora, Jim. Jim Mora for this podcast, Mike. We have this
sick people. Mentally sick.
Well, the Swoboda one with the meaningless football game.
Yeah, right? Useless game.
The difference, the meaningless, useless game, useless. So that the difference between that and a lot of other things is that didn't air. Like it didn't air it was years after it happened. Nobody, we didn't air it. Not everybody had it. And for whatever reason, so it wasn't like it was public knowledge right away. It became public knowledge years later. I mean, people knew about it, but nobody ever seen it. Like it was like the lost Kennedy tape, And so it was strange because we all knew about it, but it never was really out there. I'll say this about Jim Mora. Jim Mora was tough. He did not like the media. He hated that we had to entertain us, so to speak. So I did his coach's show for 3 years in the early 90s. And that was right when free agency was beginning, right? So Morton leaves to Atlanta, Aber Atlanta, Sam Mills, Carolina. So as a reporter, again, this goes back to that objective. Like I was like, I can't do a show with you. You're playing Carolina and not ask you about Sam Mills. That's ridiculous. I don't care if it is your show. I have to make. So he would get so furious. He would come in, we'd tape it on Thursday night, and he would sit in his chair, slumping. And he would just, there was no, hey, chat, nothing. And he would just be like brutal. And he didn't want to talk about it. He didn't want to, but he knew I was going to ask him. And every week, it was somebody new that went to it was just, and they were brutal, 3-13. I mean, they were terrible. So we taped it on Thursday. And so one night, early on, my girlfriend at the time, we weren't even married, came down to the show to watch it. We would go out to dinner afterwards. And she came the next week. And for whatever reason, he and my wife got along. He loved my wife. And from that moment on, it changed everything. He came to our wedding. Jim Mora was at our wedding. This was like in 95. This is 2 years later from sitting there just, and my wife came and changed everything. Been to his house in Destin, had margaritas on his porch one time. I mean, it was like, wait a minute. Are you kidding me? So my relationship with Jim Mora and then it became part of the media, which I think is hilarious. The guy who hated the media then became a part of it. But he's a great guy. I've known him for, but those first few years.
Mike, I'm curious, when you were with him on that show, was there a small part of you that kind of embraced the comedy and just thought, man, this is going to make for a great show, even if he's grumpy, or was it just miserable to be around?
It was brutal because you have to fill, we would fill so much time and his answer would be so short and, kind of dismissive. So there was no, maybe as I look back now, maybe, but not then. I was like, oh dear God, they're 2-7. What am I going to ask him? How am I going to fill? And we would show it Saturday night, right after the news. And it was, my wife, God bless her, Betty Ann, save the day. Save the day.
Well, I was going to say this about, Buddy D told me, he said Jim Mora was actually one of his most favorite people because he said Jim Mora, they had a roast of Buddy D. I forget what year. And he said Jim Mora gladly came back and roasted Buddy. And he's like, Jim Mora, he is a great guy because all the stuff going on during the Saints when they're bad, he just forgot about it all and just was great with Buddy afterwards, so that made me realize that like some coaches are just different. But Jim Mora, I mean, the thing about him, Mike, is I feel like it doesn't get enough credit because he dragged the Saints from the worst franchise in sports to like where he got them to. And it's so
Jim
long
Finks too. I mean, Jim Finks and Jim Mora together, were perfect at the time. You're right.
And I just remember when they hired him, it was such a big deal because he was the hot coach because he had won in the USFL. And I remember the media at the time in New Orleans, I was a kid, but they were like, the Saints, they got the guy everybody wanted. And I don't know. Jim Moore, I feel like he gets a bad rap because he never won.
Because he had, the playoff wins, but 87, great. 88, they were 10-6, I think. The problem was they were just in the NFC West with the Niners, with the Niners. So you go 10-6, you don't make the playoffs. I'm like, good gosh, and forget when the division. So it was a lot of timing. But they had, I think the playoff loss is then the home playoff losses and how they lost, even in Indianapolis. But I think that probably plays a role into it. You're right. He took this franchise from nothing to where they had won their first division, playoffs, all that stuff. And I'll say this.
Mike,
I will say this about Jim Mora because he's one of his rants was really kind of low key, but it was in lacrosse, and I think about it all the time because he's actually kind of right. We were asking about a sack or something, and he was like, you'll never know. You think you know. But you don't know because we never knew. We didn't know the play. We didn't know anybody's real assignment. So for us to really critique anything, he was like, "You can't."
You mean this one?
Because you don't know.
This one, Mike.
You guys really don't know when it's good or bad when it comes right down to it.
Will you make a promise to tell us when it's good?
And I'm promising you right now that you don't know when it's good or bad. You really don't know. Because you don't know what we're trying to do. You guys don't look at the films. You don't know what happened. You really don't know. You think you know, but you don't know. And you never will. Okay? Just for your own information. Sometimes I can tell you it won't be good, and you'll see it won't be good. Sometimes you'll think it's good, and it isn't any good. Sometimes you'll think it's bad, and it was pretty darn good. Sometimes you'll think it's bad, and it was bad. But basically, you really don't know. The only people that really know are our coaches. And that goes with run blocking, pass defense, all those things. The media, public doesn't know. You guys don't know. Not really know.
Oh, my God. That stuck with me.
Exact memory.
He's kind of right. I don't know if a guy was supposed to stunt, and he didn't stunt. And so because he didn't stunt, he leaves the other guy wide. So you don't really know. But that stuck with me. He could have ended that in 15 seconds, but he went a minute. And that's
the magic.
Like, it was like, you were done. We got it. Like I thought, and you never will. Like he should have been done. But then he kept going. But anyway, that to me, because he wasn't mad. He was just like, I'm sorry, I'm telling you something. This is the fact here. You don't know. You think you know. You don't know what's good and bad. Yeah,
especially then in the 90s.
Legitimate points. Right.
Not like Game Pass could rewatch it,
Right. But we don't, not knowing what their assignments were. Anyway, that stuck with me.
It's just so throwback, man. I wish there was coaches out there still like that. I feel like you couldn't get away with that in this day and age, talking to people like that. But it's highly entertaining.
The NFL makes you do a lot of stuff. The NFL, you got to do this, got to do that. There aren't many. Ditka. We followed up, Mora with Ditka. Haslett was tough, but they don't make them like that. Like Bill Parcells, don't make them like that anymore.
Well, before we get you out of here, Mike, I want to talk about the 2021 Saints, and that gives me a question. What, as the voice of the Saints play-by-play, what do you want to, when you have because you'll have a relationship with Sean Payton, you'll have a relationship with coaches. What is the key for you? What do you want to get out of them to make your broadcast product better?
Again, they're not going to give you a lot. I guess fundamentally what they want to do. We've and you'll probably get this more from the assistant coaches. I mean, I'm going to get what I get from Sean, just like, Zach probably didn't, but just like Jim. And I mean, Sean plays things very close to the vest. He's a smart guy. And so I know him a little bit. I don't know him very well, but you're not going to get a lot. So you try to get from assistant coaches, players. I think you want to get an overall philosophy for this team. And so people ask me, I've already, well, what do you think about this year? I don't have any idea. Tell me, who's going to be the quarterback, and so until you kind of know that and see some of these guys, I don't necessarily buy into this team's automatically bad because we lost Drew Brees. He's, there's nobody better. I mean, period. He's not even in the conversation. So if we take Drew out, but so now Sean, and this is what I tell people, I say, well, guess what? We've known since 2006, pretty much what this team was going to do offensively. We could see it and they would line up and I could say, okay, this is going to be a pass to Colson across the middle. And it was, and the other team knew it, but they couldn't stop it because Sean was a great coach. Drew was the best. We had good players, but we have known what this team's philosophy basically was for years. So did everybody else. Think of the amount of video the Tampa Bay Buccaneers had for the playoff game last year on Drew Brees and them. Oh my gosh. So it's not you knew what they were going to do, but yet they still did it, with accuracy and execution. Conversely, what is this team going to look like now? I have no idea. But guess what? Neither do the other 31 teams. For the first time, the other 31 teams are going, well, what do we look at? We don't have any film. We have that touchdown pass from Jameis in the playoff game. We'll look at that. Looking at Jameis at Tampa Bay, to me, is worthless. And if Taysom the guy, who knows? And I think Sean, in my opinion, loves that. And that's why I don't think he's going to say anything about his quarterback until he is forced to. Because why not? What do you gain? I just think he's got this, all of a sudden, if it's a system and it's Jameis, then you keep the system. But now you've got a more mobile quarterback in this system that changes RPO. It changes everything. And if it's Taysom, you've got a completely new offense. And so, everything starts from you look at 21, to me, everything starts at that quarterback position. But I still think this team is a playoff team automatically. I just do, as we sit here today, I think they're a playoff team.
Do you think he's going to sort of hide everything in the preseason and not show us much at all in the game? Sort of like, I remember the Redskins in 2012. They did.
With RG3.
Yeah, they showed nothing. And then they played the Saints and they're like, hey guys, we're running a college offense. And the Saints were like, what? I don't know. So do you think it's going to be like whatever he's got planned for Jameis, we're not going to see much of it at all in the preseason?
I totally agree. I mean, if you were talking about something like a rookie quarterback where the guy really needs to get and see the speed, but we're not. The guy, he's only played 5 years. So, and he's been around this system for a year. So if it's Jameis, if it's Taysom, same kind of thing. So I think it's going to be, I don't know how they'll treat three preseason games. Like, does one, they play a quarter, and then two, they play a half, and then three, they don't play, because no one played in the fourth preseason game. But do you have that luxury? Because OTAs have been, there's been very little hitting, very little full speed, anything until you get to camp. So I don't know. It's a fine line, but it's 20 games. It's brutal, And so I think you can gauge nothing. First off, preseason is the worst barometer of anything in sports. If you look at, percentages, wins, anything, worst barometer for anything. And this year, and this team, I think you're right. I don't think we're going to see what we see against, Jacksonville, Baltimore, and Arizona is going to be nothing like we'll see against the Packers. And maybe the bigger questions really are on defense. We always go right to, when you're replacing Drew Brees, you go right there. But, it could be defense, could be interior defensive line. But I'm excited because I don't know. And anybody that says they know, you don't. And you never will. Because you don't. We haven't seen this team do anything. We have no idea. And I don't think we're going to come out of the preseason going, oh, okay, this is what we're going to. I don't think so.
It's fun not to me. And me and Andrew have talked about it. It's fun not know. Like it's fun to go into the season not knowing.
I totally agree, and I think Sean, for whatever reason, would he want Drew Brees back? Of course, yeah. I get. Don't put that in the conversation. But does he now have like a new toy that no one knows what he's going to do, and does he love that? Unquestionably.
A couple of more things before. Go ahead, Andrew. You have a question for him?
Well, no, I just looking at this season. So, Mike, I know we talked about how you're going to be acclimating to the preseason and the 90-man rosters from both sides, and it's probably going to be more, at least at the beginning. As the season evolves, obviously you'll get into the X's and O's, and you'll get into the player. Once we know the players, we know the roster, then it becomes more about. It's just more dialed in, I think, than during preseason where it's 90-man rosters. But I'm curious, and I know you mentioned that preseason, and I agree, is not a great barometer. And yet there's going to be an opportunity to see Ian Book play, to see Trevor Siemian play, to see some of these rookies from last year that I felt like they were dealt a really bad hand. And I remember Zach telling us this. He's like, look, these kids aren't coming through OTA. If you're a rookie last year, you had no chance. And so now in year two, you look at Zach Bond and Cesar Ruiz and Troutman, who's going to be a starter at tight end. I mean, there's a lot of stories that I think they will get a lot of action in preseason because they're going to need it. And it's going to be a big sign, I think, towards their development. So I'm just curious if there's any things about preseason that you're excited about in terms of what it means for the Saints.
Well, I think you're right. I think you have to look at, people who are either going to be stepping up or breaking out. And so are they stepping up because they're in the third year of their contract and it's time, all right, you show me something? Or do we need you to step up because, hey, you're Adam Troutman, and guess what? We lost Jared Cook and Josh Hill, who combined had 54 receptions and 8 touchdowns. So we need Adam to do more and Nick Vannett because we've physically lost a lot of receptions and touchdowns. So that's different to me. Whereas we're looking at a Traquan Smith. All right, we've seen some flashes. We need to see more of that. And I think because of their positions, I think Pete Werner and Paulson are going to see legitimate time. Maybe same thing with Kawan Baker and Landon Young. Linebacker and cornerback, you have more opportunity. Peyton Turner, he can sit back and learn a little bit. I think there's a lot of pressure on Marcus Davenport, but I don't think that we are asking Peyton Turner to come in and be the guy. But whereas Pete and Paulson and Landon and Kawan, those guys could play a role just because of their position, linebacker and defensive back. So I think it's a little bit of both. I think that the preseason for the really young guys, the rookies, very important. The preseason for the guys who've been there, the Troutmans and the Ruizes and stuff like that. I'm not as worried. But when the season starts off in with Green Bay here, then I think it's important. Then I think, all right, it's step up time because we need you. And so it just depends on the position. But wide receiver certainly, and a few months ago, they were $100 million in the hole. Now they're $10 million to the plus. They've got some money to go get them a wide out or a cornerback or a linebacker or an interior defensive line, whatever they might need. And I think they will. They're not done. I mean, Mickey's never done, and so there'll be some additions.
One thing, Mike, that we talk about on this podcast is to see the evolution of the Saints from when we were kids as a joke of a franchise to being a model NFL franchise under Gail Benson. And not only that, to Terry Fontenot, he got a job with Atlanta. Kai Harley, people are going to be coming for him to run a team soon. To see the Saints evolve into this just brilliant organization and in the community, and they've always done that. But I feel like with Gail Benson and Mickey Loomis in the last 2 to 3 years, it's even gone to a different level. What as a guy who's been here for so long, what sort of impresses you most about the Saints over these however many years, and specifically the transition of ownership, you know?
Well, certainly. I mean, Mr. Benson did a lot for the city, and then Gail has kind of taken that torch and taken it to a new level. I mean, I've known her for many, many years. She's just, what you see is what you get. She's generous. She's just, Southern charm. She's just a very, very, great person. It is what it is. And so I think she's made it more visible, maybe whereas Tom probably did it. We didn't hear about it as much. They've been, her philanthropy with high schools and hospitals, not even just here, San Antonio, Canton, is unbelievable. But I think the biggest key to where this franchise is now has been the consistency. I mean, who had a Mickey Loomis, a Sean Payton, and a Drew Brees, that triumvirate together for such a long time, a Pete Carmichael, who probably, if he didn't look like he was 12, he's brilliant, and they've been able to keep the nucleus of that together, and they've won. I mean, 49-15, the last few years, and really just they traded all for, a ring, but we've become so spoiled and so used to winning. 13-3 means nothing to us. You know what I mean?
Right.
And how can that possibly be? I was like, 13-3? Okay. Yeah. I don't know. That's good. That's great. Postseason, so it was postseason. So and if you'd have told us that 20 years ago, we'd say, you're crazy. We'd go 13-3 and not be, all right, that's good. We're another division. Cool. 4 straight, it's just like crazy. But now, in the last 3 or 4 years, it's all been about winning now. It was about getting that ring. And 17, Minnesota was painful. Nothing will ever top the Rams. And then Minnesota again. If you think about, I was doing some research and looking at the Saints' playoff history, and Vikings and Rams. You took those 2 teams out. They played 3 of the teams. I mean, Philly and Arizona. But the Rams have always had this craziness, and the Vikings have always had this craziness. Like, man, the unique relationship of those 2 teams. But I mean, winning during the regular season, unfortunately, anymore for this fan base is not good enough. Winning an NFC South is not good enough. We're spoiled.
We're spoiled.
We are
spoiled rotten. And it makes me and Andrew feel like old guys, because we're like, enjoy, yes, the endings have been terrible, but the winning during the year is so much fun. Like, and people are like, oh, well, maybe we just need to go. I'm like, 3-13 is fun for about 2 weeks. You make all the jokes, and then you wake up on Sunday and you're like, this is misery, because you go to the game and you have no hope. For Drew Brees, for 16 years, in spite of having the worst defense in NFL history for a stretch, we woke up every Sunday and we're like, Saints can win because Drew can just go be Superman. And I just think that over time, it's spoiled our fan base incredibly. But I think this year it's going to be tremendous, Mike. And I can't wait to hear your calls. And thanks for giving us time. And I enjoy the ride. I think people are going to, once we know football is back, I think people are going to embrace this season because of the COVID and just the weirdness of last year. I think Saints Nation is just going to come roaring back, and it's going to be above normal levels, which is just, it's crazy. I think it's going to be a level above this year because we know what we missed and we're ready to get back.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's an excitement that's building. We all don't really know. We haven't really seen much of this team. But if you were here at any of the games last year, I was at every one. And from that first Tampa game to where we had the practice squad players, 11 sitting in each, stands, and that was it, to where they had 6,000 for the Falcons game, and it felt like the Super Bowl. I can't imagine what it's going to feel like to get back with full capacity. And I think, the schedule is the schedule. It's not great. It's not impossible. And I just think, I think this football, I think Sean is going to find a way. And I think he's excited. I think we're going to see some stuff we haven't seen. And if the defense can be, we never asked the defense to do too much because we've always had Drew, but now we don't have Drew. So I'm excited. I appreciate the time. I'm looking forward to it. And it'll be something new for me. This will be the first time I watched the game from this position. And, the press box was on the 300 level when I was in sports. Now I'm like, I went up there the other day with my binoculars, like, are you kidding me? We're way up here.
Also, dress warm, Mike. Dress warm.
That I do know. Trust me, I'm on the field. I would be on the field in like sweaters and people are like, what's going on? Like, it's freezing down here. So I'm used to that part.
So that's Mike Haas. He's the voice of the Saints, guys. You know him. It's going to be amazing. Mike, thanks for giving us time, guys. This has been a pleasure. Thanks for supporting the show. And we will see you again on the YouTube stream live Sunday night. Thanks for watching the Saints Happy Hour. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Then find us wherever you get your podcast. And finally, go to saintshappyhour.com and become a patron of the best Saints podcast on earth.